I think everyone has that one friend who's always talking about how they want to buy a hypercar. And every time you ask them why, their response is always the same. It's because they're fast, they look amazing, and it sounds like a proper race car. But let me tell you something. Owning a hypercar is not as fun as it may seem, and can actually be a real pain in the neck. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. And let's put an end to this myth right away. Hypercars are not easy to own and drive. In fact, they are extremely difficult to own and drive. You will need to adjust your driving style completely when you switch to a hypercar. But before we go any further into the video, if you appreciate content like this, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new upload. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into the video. Most people assume that the only major difference between a normal car and a hypercar is the engine. They think that the more power you have, the more fun you will have behind the wheel. Well, they couldn't be more wrong. The problem is not just getting all that power to the ground, but also handling the weight of the vehicle. Most hypercars weigh over 3,000 pounds. For example, the McLaren P1 weighs 3,285 pounds, which is about 1,500 kilos or 3,300 pounds. This may not sound like a lot, but for perspective, a Ferrari F430 weighs around 2,930 pounds, so we're talking about almost a 400-pound weight difference. That extra weight makes a huge difference on the road where grip is at a premium and there's no margin for error. If you get on the power too early or take a corner too quickly, you will immediately lose control of the vehicle. Another issue is that these cars don't really have a turbo lag, but instead have something called torque lag. Both terms basically mean the same thing. But while turbo lag happens when your turbo needs to spool up, torque lag happens when your electric motor needs to spool up. This means that even though the engine may be producing peak power, the electric motor isn't ready yet, and that means that all that power isn't going to get sent to the wheels. Even if you manage to get past the torquey lag, you then have to deal with the sheer amount of power. We all know that having too much power is not a problem. Well, if you do, you'd be wrong. Having too much power can actually be very dangerous. If you accidentally press the accelerator pedal all the way down, you won't have enough time to react. Take the Pagani Huayra, for example. This car goes from 0 to 60 in just 2.6 seconds. That's 2.5 seconds for you to realize what's happening and pull your foot off the gas. Good luck doing that. This is why most hypercars have launch control. Without launch control, you won't be able to get anywhere near the insane acceleration figures these cars put out. With launch control, however, you eliminate the human error factor and the car does everything for you. All you have to do is keep your foot on the brake, put the car in gear, and release the clutch. After that, launch control takes over, and you just hold on tight. Now, we talked about how you need to adjust your driving style when you get into a hypercar, but what kind of driving style would be suitable for these vehicles? Well, you need to be smooth with your inputs. No sudden movements when driving a hypercar. That includes braking, accelerating, and turning the steering wheel. You need to be gentle with the car, because otherwise it will bite back and punish you mercilessly. Take the 918 Spider, for example. It has 3 different driving modes: normal, sport, and race. In normal mode, the car behaves like a normal GT car, but switch over to sport mode, and you feel like you're driving a go-kart. That's because the traction and stability controls intervene way earlier in sport mode. Turn the dial over to race, and you'll feel like you're driving a rear-wheel drive drift car. The lack of stability control makes it feel like you're driving on the edge of a knife. This is why I say you need to be a smooth operator when you're behind the wheel of a hypercar. Just because you have launch control doesn't mean you can take corners like a maniac. And unlike a normal car where you could just power your way out of a corner, you can't do that in a hypercar. If you get on the power too early, you'll just spin the car out. You need to be patient and wait for the car to get to the optimal point before you start getting on the power. This requires a lot of experience and skill, and that's why most hypercar owners hire a driving coach. But let's say you've mastered the art of hypercar driving. Are you in the clear now? Well, unfortunately, the answer is no. Hypercars require a lot of maintenance. Not only is it expensive to maintain a hypercar, but it's also hard to find good mechanics who know what they're doing. These cars are so advanced that even a small mistake can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. For example, if you overheat your engine, you can easily bend a rod or two, and replacing those rods costs about $20,000. A friend of mine actually did that in his 9018 Spider. He was driving it on the track and didn't realize that the temperature gauge was going up. When he finally looked at it, it was already too late. The engine had overheated and he bent a rod. He ended up having to pay a hefty price to fix the engine. And speaking of driving on the track, that's another thing you need to consider. If you want to push your hypercar to its limits, you need to take it to the track. But this isn't for everyone. You need to know what you're doing when you're pushing a car to its limits. Otherwise, you run the risk of crashing. And if you do crash your hypercar, you can kiss your insurance goodbye. Most insurance companies won't cover a hypercar because they are so expensive. This is why you see a lot of hypercar owners with trailer hitches. That way they can easily transport their cars to the track without having to worry about driving them on public roads. So we've talked about how difficult it is to drive a hypercar, how much of a handful they can be, and how much maintenance they need. But is there anything else you should consider before buying one? Well, yes, there is. For example, where are you going to park it? Most hypercars are very low to the ground, and you need to have a garage with high ceilings to fit them. You also need to have a ramp to drive the car into your garage. I know a guy who tried to drive his LaFerrari into his garage without using a ramp, and he ended up bottoming out and cracking the diffuser. Not only is it hard to fit these cars in your garage, but it's also hard to fit them on the road. Because of their extreme width and length, you need to make sure that you have enough room to maneuver. Otherwise, you'll end up scraping the bodywork on everything. I saw a guy in a McLaren P1 try to turn into a street, and he ended up scraping the side skirts and the front splitter. So is it worth it to own a hypercar? Well, that's a tough question to answer. For some people, yes, it's totally worth it. For others, no, it's not. It all depends on your driving style and experience. If you're someone who wants to take their car to the track and push it to the limit, then a hypercar is perfect for you. But if you're not that type of driver, then you're better off with a more normal car. What I can tell you is that owning a hypercar is not all fun and games. It comes with a lot of responsibilities, and if you're not willing to put in the work, you're better off staying away from these cars. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you're interested in buying a hypercar, I highly recommend that you test drive one first. That way you can get a feel for what it's like to drive one and decide if it's right for you. If you're not interested in buying a hypercar, that's totally fine. There are plenty of other great cars out there that you can buy. Just remember to test drive any car before you buy it. You never know what you might learn. If you want to learn more about hypercars, I suggest you watch our video on the top 10 fastest hypercars in the world. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you love this content, consider subscribing. Thank you for watching.